relationship itself, when there's an issue, when two persons have an issue in a relationship itself, there's always three things to look at. First, the relationship with the mother. What's her relationship with herself? Then of course there's a relationship with the daughter. And then this is the relationship together. So in any single moment in a two-person conflict that you just mentioned, there are three things exactly that needed to be looked at. And of course, when you really look into it, communication itself is like, it's going one way, but she's not really communicating back. But is she really not communicating back? Or is she just not communicating back that the mother perceived or used to? Because clearly she's giving a feedback back to the mom, which is a little bit invisible, saying that, she doesn't want to communicate. So what are the needs, that are not met in the relationship? What is the unsaid? So we're going to find out what's the unsaid. The needs that's not met. What's the history? What's the background?
Mother and father had quite a fair amount of tension because the husband is quite controlling.
Okay.
And the mother always wanted to be, she feels like she has to do everything, put all the bills herself because he tries to control, and whatever she wants, he just doesn't give in to it. So there's always that tension. The daughter is like the favorite child of the husband, right? So she's somebody who, the daughter is somebody who had to mature quite fast because of the tension in the family. But then she also has a very introverted personality, which the mother is trying to connect to and build a better bond with. She has that bond with her son, but not her daughter. So
there's a son. But right now we're not really looking at the son, we're looking into three family unit. Even if I don't look at the son, that's really ongoing, what that's happening. Where the conflict keep persisting, she's not getting her needs met in the husband, she's either not getting her needs met with the son or the daughter. And then she runs a conversation, nobody understands her, nobody stands for her. So this woman is kind of an issue, even before we can look into the complexity of each of the issue itself. So in a situation of conflict like this, when did she agree, whether is it subconsciously, consciously or unconsciously, not to have her needs met? Now it sounds like a very obvious question that we should have our needs met, but not everybody are oriented that way. Some people are oriented not to have their needs met, so that they get something. So what does she get? What does she get from being ignored? What does she get from being ignored? Because she's getting something off from this whole thing. That's why we persist our patterns. People persist their patterns because they're getting their needs met from it. So even if on the societal front, on the surface level, it seems like it's a bad thing, it's not a good trait, negative trait. But as long as it fulfills their personal narrative of something inside of them that they desire the most, then they are getting something off from it. So which is a very funny way of how we perceive value. Because if a person believes that they are not enough, they have to constantly recreate situations in their life where they are not enough, so that that narrative is met and they get something out from it when it's met. Sometimes it's pain because a long time ago something happened and they haven't really quite moved on from it, and they haven't really quite forgiven themselves for what they did or they did not do. As a result of that, they keep recreating situations in their life such that they will feel this particular way as a trigger, and then it plays out their whole narrative so that they get that thing. So it becomes a complete loop, a complete circuit. Because after they get that thing already, then what happens? So there's a pleasure that's met already, there's a condition that's already fulfilled. And then what happens when the condition is fulfilled? Then after that, depending on how they're designed or how they're being constructed, they might either beat themselves up, okay, after a certain period of time where the energy runs out or worn out, they will have a different reaction. Okay, time to get my act together. And okay, time to fuck it up. Time to create situation in their life where they're not enough, or create situation in their life where they're ignored, which is kind of a reflection of her relationship. So I wouldn't just look at her from her family system. I will also look at her from her relationship with her colleagues, her relationship with her mother's home, her relationship with her father's home. What's the family dynamic itself? Because this relationship itself is just, I want to know whether it is only happening here, or is it a repeated trait and pattern that happens in other parts of her life? Then we can talk about her, because this whole thing doesn't really talk about family system. It's more about her, where this woman, have a broken relationship with herself. So on the surface level, she can go out look for answers, thinking that with a tool externally is going to solve it, because it might, or it might not, because she's looking at the wrong place. That the issue doesn't lie with her, but it's her, and she's merely a reflection of her relationship with herself. If you really look at it from a role-based perspective, that the daughter is playing out what exactly the mother desires. So we call that dreaming into the role itself. Then the question is this really a personal issue, or is this a role-based issue? What was the conflict? What was her relationship with her own mother like? So this is the current present, correct? I want to know her past, the mother, in order for us to really identify the real problem.
At the moment, I think what I'm hearing is that at the end of the day, it still goes back to whatever that's being played out in your current family right now. It will have its roots to your previous family.
Definitely, because that was the only time you identify yourself being part of a family. So let's say, if a person, doesn't like her family, okay, this is a real case. If this particular person doesn't like, his family orientation, because maybe the father had multiple wives, and then, this guy, realized that, he's a stepson, he's the son of the mistress. So even though, in the existing family unit, they're together, but some of this truth, is too overbearing, such that, he constantly has to go outside to look for a family. So that itself is I can't remember what's the exact word, it's a replacement. It's like an alter family itself of what he couldn't get from his family. And then because his family, it go against, a lot of the social norms, construct all that itself, this kid itself, as he was growing up, it left him in a very confused state, because he had to meet his stepbrothers and stepsisters. They was born in a different family, and he has to be the younger one, that is liked by everybody. But of course, the dynamic situation isn't like that. So the position, the roles, all that is displaced really, and then it makes it even more real, especially when he's not getting what he wants from his family. He has to create it from the outside. So the danger of that thing itself that I'm talking about, right, is that he constantly keep creating family, just as what his father did. You get it? It's not so straightforward. It is so straightforward, yet it's not so straightforward. And we're not talking about a pure hypothesis, we're talking about a similar pattern that keeps repeating. So you can see that this guy is just like his father, constantly creating the desire. So it's important to work through your daddy-mommy issues, because the unfulfilled dreams of the parents get passed down. So maybe when I was younger, I wanted to be a musician. But of course, I thought that was my dream. Until when I started working on myself, I have clarity that that wasn't really my dream. That was the unfulfilled dream of my father. That I'm merely picking it up, from my system, from my sensory, from my dreaming itself, and I took that on, without realizing that it's not my dream. I like music, but not to the degree that I want to be a musician, yet I kept dreaming myself as a musician. But then, on a deeper level of introspection and work itself, I realized that wasn't me, but that was the younger version of my father. Okay, of him, wanting to be a guitarist, but he never did. So when the dreams, becomes unfulfilled, it get passed down, it get passed on until somebody pick it up. Somebody, with certain criteria that for the dream itself, start picking it up. Danger of it is we don't examine our thought process. We keep thinking that every thought that we have comes from us, but we don't realize that we're merely picking things up. So a lot of people rely very heavily on their head, but they don't realize that the narrative, the scripts might not be all there. Even the voices, if you really listen carefully, is not really them per se. So how do we know whether something, an idea in our head, a voice in our head is really ours or is it not? And the trick is to be able to hear the tonality, the pitch. So there's still benefit in learning music, I realize. Makes it very easy to categorize, give you that kind of mental clarity to sort certain information out and not sort certain information out itself. And whatever we're talking about, this whole topic itself is very complex by nature, because you have to master a lot of nuances in order to be able to grasp the unseen, the invisible world. So relationship, conflicts, all that kind of stuff, more fluid, more volatile, more invisible. Okay, and a lot of people doesn't know how to really navigate that. And when they don't know how to navigate that, they just do it their way. But their way hasn't really quite worked out since they don't have a precedence of having good relations in their life. That's why it's important to work through your daddy-mommy issues. Like how you are your father, like how you're your mother, like how you're not your father, like how you're not your mother. Because how you are and how you're not is the same side of a coin. And especially if you grew up with your father and mother since your entire life, in other words, when you were a kid, those people are your literal world. And of course, they shape your world literally because of that. So the flaws of the parents itself, also get passed on. And that's why it's important to work through all these things in order to transcend that whole reality itself. Put it this way, you might think that you don't have a choice, for example, that you didn't have a choice to choose who your parents are. But that statement is not true. You're constantly choosing. Not choosing is also a choice. In other words, consider this. What if you chose your parents for a reason? What if you chose them so that they can teach you a lesson either of how to be and how not to be, so that you can learn certain lessons that your soul has originated, signed as a contract? If that's the case, right, then nothing is really quite random, because there is a purpose to everything. It's just whether you're aware of the real purpose. Like, what was it that your mom was supposed to show you about love, about unconditionality? Because the mother's love is actually not really unconditioned. The mother protects the child because there is a child. So that's a condition. And then of course there's a statement called blood is thicker than the water, which we know that is not true, because the original saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, which those two words were taken out and the whole meaning got misconstrued. So where in our life do we need to exercise more discernment, more awareness, and more expansion? Because right now the way we look at problems, we are no longer just looking at, okay, you have this problem, because what you think is the problem is not the problem, it's a symptom. But how do we begin to start looking into the real problem of the symptoms? What kind of mental clarity and emotional clarity and physical clarity and spiritual clarity must we have in order to be able to see that? But really, we never really quite ask, does this system really benefit us? Does this system really benefit our evolution, our development? Does this system really forward our relations? Whether it's with ourselves, with the people around, or even with the whole idea of family, home, the world. So when your life needs to change.
The question I have is, what happens to the dynamics of a family when people leave or pass on? For instance, if I have a family of 5 and then my dad passed away, and then shortly after my brother moves out, so then it leaves 3 in the family, right? What happens to the family dynamics and whether or not the missing figures end up being dreamed up elsewhere or within these 3 people?
Okay, like what you said, originally, it started from a family of 5. And then when the father passed on, it created a void, which means, nobody is playing that role. So out of these 4 people, they had to start reshuffling themselves into the role based on their orientation itself. So for example, the daughter can end up playing the role of a father in the family, or even a husband, to the mother. And then what you're also saying is that, the brother left as well. So that brings back only to 3 people in the family, but originally there was 5 roles. Like what you say, if those roles are empty and if these persons are not able to play those roles, then people dream another person into these roles. So if you can't find it from the inside, you have to find it from the outside in order to fulfill the roles itself, which also tells me that family is something very important to you. And if it's important enough to you, you will have to dream it elsewhere. Look into your relationship, could that possibly explain why you're looking for alternate families, which is why you hold so deeply reverence to friends and family relationship, which means somebody else has to play the father role, somebody else has to play the brother role, which you kind of just answered.
Understand. So then every family has a certain set of dynamics, right?
Construct.
Construct.
And their world is built around that construct. You see, the construct is a man-made construct, but the very fact is the world is built around it. All their experiences, they use that frame or construct to justify and rationalize the experiences of the world. So that creates a different kind of ceiling and limitation.
How does a family then break out of this construct?
First, to have the awareness and consciousness that, there is a construct that you're living in, and your world is built around that construct, which means that construct is not based on truth. That construct is based on the family unit itself, which means there will be delusions in that construct. So are you able to name the delusions and illusions in that construct? That's one. The second thing is, realize, how this construct, either it has been serving you or not serve you. Because if it doesn't serve you, you will rebel against it, and then you will try to create a different construct elsewhere. Or if it serves you, you will find all ways to retain it. Just visualize yourself building a governance within the family. If it doesn't serve you, then you're going to let it go, or you're going to change it, or you're going to tear it out. That's why destruction and death is always welcome, because without crisis, without death, people won't change. And people need that in order to evolve, to change, to go to a new level of gain. The fourth thing after that is really about realizing, what roles that you've been dreaming each other's in. Whether those roles come from a lack of, or those roles come from role models in your family itself. So if I were to talk about role models, what's the first thing that comes up for you?
It's a challenging question.
It is. Because even though your father, let's say, for example, your father wasn't really a good role model to you as you were growing up, but the very fact is the role of a father itself becomes something that you desire, because somebody else has to replace him to be the role model for it, because there must be a reference point that you're referencing as a compass, of how to navigate the world.
So when could it be that, in terms of looking for a role model for my father, then would that relate to the real bosses that I tend to attract at work?
Possible.
They are more, they will give me space and continue to do what I like, and there to stand for me and help to give me the exposure that I need.
Possible. Because, they are kind of an authority figure, like you say, in those constructs itself. And if you're saying that their tendency tend to be male, then, they kind of match up of one of the things about the father component.
So then, like, for instance, if let's say there's a family of 5, right? And then most of the family are daughters except for one of the kids. Very laid back, very chill, and not so uptight like the rest.
They're trying to, these people are valuable. They're the black sheep in the family. They're there to show the family what they are not and what they can possibly be. So the black sheep, are always identified as a black sheep because they cause trouble. But the trouble they cause is towards the existing construct that the people actually spend their long years, building and sustaining it.
Yeah. So in this case, the black sheep is like the clue for the family to balance out the dynamics.
To heal any imbalances, to heal any of the unsaid that runs in the family. So usually the black sheep are the pattern breakers in those units.
So does every family have an obvious black sheep or pattern breaker? Because sometimes it isn't as clear-cut as...
It really depends, isn't it? Because some people's role when they are born, they chose certain family to be in, they carry a bigger role. And some of this role is to really disrupt the family systems, so that generations of people that came before them can heal, and generations for future can live differently. So these are what we call pattern breakers. They disrupt the original flow that was already set up. And just like any tech companies or companies, we need innovation to evolve. So death is a thing, but most people, they're scared of death. So Every time the idea of changing, change comes in and they get scared. They refuse, they resist, they reject. And that's why they don't grow. That's why they continue to remain at where they are. Newton's first law, an object will remain at rest or will continue to move in a line of motion unless an external force is acted on.
So it's really about taking a bigger picture to look at the different roles that each member plays and what is the bigger lesson or growth that the family is in.
Correct. And sometimes it's not so obvious because when you're in it, it's hard to see what the problem is. That's why the fluidity of being able to detach yourself from those roles allow you to start seeing this. So that is how a conscious relationship or family will look like. That all parties, they have done their self-work, they have done their body work, their symptoms work, they're dreaming. That they can consciously detach themselves from their roles and to just allow themselves to just be there to watch this whole dynamic self. That's how a forwarding relationship and community or family could look like. That every member itself have the ability to detach themselves from the role. And that detachment itself gives you a lot of fluidity because anything you doesn't serve you, you can just let it go. You can just move into a different role without necessarily bitching about it, like why is it be like this, like that, just because it doesn't follow a routine that you're familiar with.